U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a 50-day ultimatum to Russia, threatening severe sanctions unless a peace deal is reached in Ukraine. This announcement, made in the Oval Office alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, marks a significant shift in Trump's stance toward Moscow. Trump's ultimatum and Ukraine's support. Trump's proposal includes 100% tariffs on buyers of Russian exports, notably crude oil, and unspecified secondary sanctions if a peace agreement isn't reached within the stipulated timeframe. He also confirmed new Patriot missile deliveries to Ukraine, funded by NATO allies, signaling renewed military support. Trump expressed frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, whom he described as a tough guy who has repeatedly fooled previous U.S. administrations regarding peace efforts. Despite his previous attempts at rapprochement, Trump now indicates a hardening position due to the ongoing conflict. Russia's dismissal. Russia has largely dismissed Trump's ultimatum as theatrical. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev stated on X that Russia didn't care, suggesting the threats would not sway the Kremlin. While official Kremlin comments have been limited, state media has focused on Russian military advances in Ukraine and drone attacks on Russian territory, downplaying the significance of Trump's remarks. Some Russian newspapers have even invoked themes of betrayal in their coverage, indicating a perception that Trump, once seen as a potential peacemaker, has joined the party of war. Broader implications and economic impact. The proposed sanctions, particularly secondary tariffs targeting countries that continue to buy Russian oil, could have significant global economic repercussions. Russia is the world's second-largest oil exporter, with China, India, and Turkey being its primary buyers. If implemented, these measures would force these nations to choose between maintaining trade with Russia and accessing Western financial systems and markets. The effectiveness of such sanctions hinges on how these major importers would react and whether they would comply, potentially impacting global energy prices and Russia's critical oil revenues, which significantly fund its war effort. In the U.S., there's bipartisan support in the Senate for legislation that could grant the president authority to impose even higher tariffs, up to 500%, on countries supporting Russia. However, Republican leaders are awaiting Trump's signal for a vote. The ongoing developments highlight the complex interplay of diplomacy, economic pressure, and military aid in the protracted conflict in Ukraine. The recent theatrical ultimatum issued by U.S. President Donald Trump to Russia, linking severe sanctions to a swift peace deal in Ukraine, arises from a complex interplay of the protracted Russia-Ukraine conflict, evolving U.S. foreign policy, and Russia's strategic calculations. The protracted conflict and search for peace. The core circumstance is the ongoing war in Ukraine, which began in 2014 and escalated significantly with Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. Despite heavy casualties on both sides and widespread destruction, the conflict has largely settled into a grinding war of attrition. Russia currently controls roughly a fifth of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and significant parts of eastern and southern Ukraine, and shows no sign of withdrawing voluntarily. Efforts toward a peace settlement have been largely stalled. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky seeks to reclaim all occupied territories and ensure Ukraine's sovereignty, Russian President Vladimir Putin maintains that any peace must be on his terms, which effectively involve Ukraine ceding territory and abandoning its ambition to join Western alliances like NATO. These vastly divergent objectives make a negotiated settlement incredibly difficult. International mediation efforts have yielded little progress, leading to a sense of fatigue and frustration among some global leaders. Trump's shifting stance and motivations. President Trump's ultimatum represents a notable shift in his approach to the conflict, particularly given his past rhetoric that often seemed more conciliatory towards Putin than his predecessors. Several factors likely contribute to this. Deal-maker persona. Trump has consistently presented himself as a master negotiator capable of resolving intractable conflicts. This ultimatum fits his art of the deal narrative, aiming to force a quick resolution to a conflict that has drained global resources and attention. He explicitly stated, "I use trade for a lot of things, but it's great for settling wars." Domestic political pressure. There is strong, bipartisan pressure in the U.S. Congress for tougher action against Russia. The Senate, with 85 co-sponsoring senators for a bill proposing steep tariffs, reflects this sentiment. While Trump previously paused some U.S. military aid to Ukraine, the renewed commitment of Patriot missile systems and other weapons, albeit via European allies, indicates a response to the perceived need for continued support for Kyiv. Frustration with Putin. Despite past attempts at engagement, Trump's recent comments, calling Putin a tough guy and expressing exasperation with his actions, suggest a growing impatience with the Russian leader's perceived intransigence and the relentless barrages on Ukrainian cities. Reasserting U.S. leadership. The ultimatum can also be seen as an attempt to reassert forceful U.S. leadership on the global stage, demonstrating a willingness to use economic leverage to achieve foreign policy objectives. Russia's perspective and resilience. Russia's swift dismissal of the ultimatum as theatrical stems from its own strategic objectives and its experience with previous Western sanctions. Unwavering objectives. Russia views the war as existential, aiming to prevent Ukraine's full alignment with the West and secure a buffer zone. It's highly unlikely to abandon these core objectives under external pressure, especially from an ultimatum perceived as a political stunt. Sanctions adaptation. Russia has spent years adapting its economy to Western sanctions, first imposed after the 2014 annexation of Crimea. While these sanctions have caused economic costs, Russia has shifted its focus to a wartime economy, increased domestic production, and cultivated stronger trade ties with non-Western partners like China, India, and Turkey. These countries are major buyers of Russian oil, and Russia believes they may continue trade despite U.S. threats of secondary sanctions. Maintaining sovereignty. The Kremlin consistently rejects what it sees as external dictates regarding its foreign policy and security interests. An ultimatum is likely to be met with defiance rather than compliance, as acceding would undermine its perceived strength and sovereignty. Information warfare. Russian state media narratives focus on military successes and portray Western actions as attempts to undermine Russia, reinforcing domestic support for the war effort and discrediting international pressure. In essence, Trump's ultimatum is an attempt to use economic coercion to force a resolution in Ukraine, driven by a mix of political ambition, strategic frustration, and domestic pressure. However, Russia's response reflects its entrenched strategic goals, its hardened economy, and a deep-seated rejection of what it perceives as external interference in its core interests, creating a standoff that remains highly unpredictable. The recent international discourse surrounding Russia and the Ukraine conflict has been significantly shaped by a theatrical ultimatum issued by U.S. President Donald Trump. This sequence of events highlights the persistent challenges in resolving the protracted conflict and the complex dynamics of global power. The ongoing conflict and stalled peace efforts. The backdrop to this issue is the enduring Russia-Ukraine war, now in its third year since the full-scale invasion. Despite extensive military aid to Ukraine from Western allies, including the United States, and numerous rounds of sanctions against Russia, the conflict remains largely stalemated. Russian forces control considerable Ukrainian territory, and intense fighting continues along the front lines. Efforts to broker a peace deal have consistently failed, largely due to fundamentally opposing demands. Ukraine seeks the full restoration of its territorial integrity, while Russia insists on terms that involve territorial concessions and acknowledgement of its annexed regions. This impasse has led to growing international frustration and a desire for a definitive resolution. Trump's pronouncement and U.S. policy shift, July 14, 2025. On Monday, July 14, 2025, President Trump made a pivotal announcement from the Oval Office, alongside NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. This marked a noticeable shift in his public stance toward Russia. He declared that unless Russia agreed to a peace deal in Ukraine within 50 days, the U.S. would impose 100% secondary tariffs on buyers of Russian exports, particularly crude oil. Simultaneously, Trump announced a new commitment to supply advanced weapons to Ukraine, including Patriot missile systems, with European allies expected to foot the bill. His rhetoric reflected growing frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin, whom he described as a tough guy who had fooled previous U.S. administrations. This ultimatum, framed as a means to force a swift end to the conflict, also underscored Trump's long-held belief in using economic leverage, particularly trade, as a tool for international negotiation. Russia's immediate dismissal, July 15, 2025. The reaction from Moscow was swift and defiant. On Tuesday, July 15, 2025, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, a senior security official, publicly dismissed Trump's ultimatum. In a post on X, Medvedev stated, "Trump issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin. Russia didn't care." This response signaled Moscow's unwillingness to be pressured by such demands. While the Kremlin's official statement remained muted on Trump's specific ultimatum, it reiterated that the United States continued to supply weapons and ammunition to Ukraine. Russian state television focused its coverage on the ongoing advances of Russian troops in Ukraine and reported on Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian territory, effectively downplaying the impact of Trump's threats. Notably, Kommersant, a respected Russian newspaper, ran a headline invoking Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. At 2, Trump, the main peacekeeper of Ukrainian conflict, joined the party of war, suggesting a sense of betrayal. Underlying dynamics and uncertainties. Following Trump's announcement, a White House official confirmed the intention to impose the 100% tariffs and secondary sanctions, targeting countries that continue to purchase Russian oil if no peace deal materializes. This move has gained support in the U.S. Senate, where a bipartisan bill proposing even steeper 500% tariffs on any country aiding Russia had already garnered significant co-sponsorship, awaiting a presidential green light for a vote. Despite this pressure, Russian President Putin has consistently maintained that he is ready to make peace only on his terms, emphasizing that a ceasefire is pointless until the specifics of a peace agreement are finalized. This stance continues to be met with skepticism from European powers and Ukrainian officials, who frequently implore the U.S. to maintain firm pressure on Moscow. The effectiveness of these potential sanctions remains a critical unknown. Major buyers of Russian crude, such as China, India, and Turkey, would face immense pressure to alter their trade relationships if secondary sanctions were fully enforced. Their response will be crucial in determining whether Trump's theatrical ultimatum can indeed compel Russia to the negotiating table on terms acceptable to the West and Ukraine. The issue at hand is the current diplomatic stalemate between the U.S. and Russia regarding the Ukraine conflict, exemplified by Trump's recent ultimatum and Moscow's swift dismissal of it. Finding solutions to such a deeply entrenched geopolitical problem requires a multifaceted approach, incorporating diplomatic, economic, and security strategies, alongside internal shifts by the involved parties, diplomatic pathways and incentives. For a resolution, direct and sustained diplomatic engagement remains paramount, even amidst public ultimatums. While Trump's 50-day deadline aims to accelerate a deal, a more nuanced approach could involve behind-the-scenes negotiations, secret or back-channel talks, potentially facilitated by a neutral third party, like Turkey, which has previously offered mediation, could explore compromises without the public pressure that often rigidifies positions. Phased de-escalation. Instead of an immediate, comprehensive peace deal, a series of smaller, confidence-building measures could be pursued. This might include limited ceasefires for humanitarian purposes, prisoner exchanges, or agreements on specific demilitarized zones, building trust gradually. Security guarantees. For Ukraine, a durable peace would likely require robust international security guarantees, potentially involving NATO or a new collective security framework that go beyond current military aid. For Russia, a solution might involve discussions around its long-stated security concerns regarding NATO expansion, though this is a highly contentious point. Clarity on peace terms. Both sides need to articulate realistic and flexible peace terms. While Ukraine's territorial integrity is a non-negotiable principle for Kyiv and its allies, some form of status quo or demilitarized zones might be considered as part of a temporary arrangement, paving the way for a more permanent solution. Russia, for its part, would need to signal genuine willingness to negotiate a withdrawal from occupied territories. Economic leverage and re-engagement. Trump's focus on tariffs and secondary sanctions highlights the economic dimension of the conflict. For sanctions to be effective as a tool for peace, unified enforcement. The effectiveness of sanctions hinges on widespread international cooperation. If major buyers of Russian oil like China, India, and Turkey do not comply, the economic pressure on Russia will be significantly diluted. Solutions might involve high-level diplomatic efforts to ensure these nations face clear and compelling incentives to align with the sanctions regime. Calibrated pressure and off-ramps. Sanctions are most effective when they are targeted, imposing significant costs on the aggressor, while offering clear pathways for relief should the desired behavior change occur. The current 50-day ultimatum is a binary, all-or-nothing approach. A more effective strategy might involve a tiered system of sanctions, with partial relief offered for incremental steps towards peace. This requires a sanctions relief playbook that clarifies conditions for reduction, as experts suggest. Economic reconstruction incentives. A comprehensive peace deal would necessitate massive reconstruction efforts in Ukraine. International actors could offer substantial financial aid packages as an incentive for peace, contingent on Russian withdrawal and genuine commitments to a stable future. For Russia, the lifting of broader sanctions, beyond just those related to oil exports, could serve as a powerful economic incentive once a verifiable peace is established. Internal shifts and multilateral engagement. Ultimately, a lasting solution will require internal shifts in calculus from both Moscow and Kyiv, influenced by their allies and the broader international community. Realistic expectations. Both sides, and their respective supporters, may need to adopt more realistic expectations about what can be achieved through military means versus negotiation. This involves acknowledging the current military stalemate and the human and economic costs of prolonged conflict. Multilateral frameworks. The involvement of international organizations like the UN, OSCE, and regional bodies can provide neutral platforms for dialogue, monitor ceasefires, and facilitate humanitarian corridors. While the UN Security Council faces challenges due to veto powers, other UN agencies and regional efforts, like those by Turkey or the EU, can still play crucial facilitating roles. Public opinion management. For leaders like Trump and Putin, domestic public opinion plays a significant role. Solutions might involve framing peace initiatives in ways that resonate with their respective domestic audiences, emphasizing stability, economic benefits, or national security. In conclusion, solving the issue of Russia's continued aggression and the lack of a peace deal in Ukraine demands a delicate balance of strong economic pressure, persistent diplomatic engagement, and the willingness of all parties to seek mutually acceptable compromises. There is no single, simple solution, but rather a combination of coordinated international efforts aimed at creating both the pain points and the incentives necessary for peace.